The PlayAction Podcast is fueled by Picasso's Pizza, where every night is pizza night.
Welcome in, everyone, to a very special edition of the PlayAction Podcast, where we are going to preview the season ahead of getting to the Ravens game for Week 1. But there is so much to talk about with this Bills team just going into this 2025-26 season. Lance, let's start with the offense. Let's kind of go through, what the team ended up shaking out to, what we're projecting for them. I mean, it all starts with Josh Allen, of course, but there's a lot to get into with this offense of how they kind of formulated this roster.
Yeah, not nearly as much turnover and not as many new additions. They brought mostly everybody back. I mean, 10 offensive linemen, all 3 running backs, basically every receiver except for Matt Collins, and they added Joshua Palmer, 2 of the 3 tight ends. So you're continuity, and you have that as well with offensive coordinator Joe Brady and his second full season calling the plays. It'll be interesting to see how they build off of last season, right? We saw how much more they ran the ball, how much more effective they were as an offense, how more efficient, and Josh Allen was 12 fewer interceptions in the previous year. And it was interesting hearing him throughout camp talking about how he wants to, the areas that he wants to improve. Even though he won NFL MVP, he was frustrated watching some of the game video from last season because he kept seeing areas that, he could have been better.
Lance, you have a story coming out on that soon, so everyone make sure you're reading buffalonews.com. But I think that's a good sign when your MVP quarterback is still trying to get better. Now, I think the bigger thing is what can his supporting cast do? I'm really interested in this receiving core, just kind of right now they are navigating an injury with Khalil Shakir, who did return to practice this week, the week ahead of the Ravens game. But I think there's still some question marks there as far as did Josh Allen build enough chemistry with some of these guys, with a Joshua Palmer, with an Elijah Moore, just kind of what's going on there.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's particularly interesting when it comes to Palmer because of the types of routes he's going to run and how he's more of a downfield threat, and developing chemistry with the quarterback on those deeper throws is a lot more difficult than the short to intermediate stuff that you're going to see Elijah Moore doing, right? And Palmer's somebody that that's an area that they really want to improve as an offense. Last season, Josh Allen he had 26 completions that traveled 20-plus air yards. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty good number. He was top 7 in the league, if I remember correctly. And another area they want to improve, and Palmer's somebody with his route running. He was impressive in camp. When they were on the same page, you could see what his role is going to be. Katherine, I know this time of year, training camp, so much on social media is about fantasy football and the crazy hype with different players, but it is very much legitimate when it comes to Keon Coleman and the differences that we saw from him.
I think you hear it from his teammates too, from his coaches, just talking about how there's that maturity level, how he was able to kind of raise the bar for himself and put in actual work behind the scenes. We talked to Keon himself about it some, but I think also just getting that stamp of approval from coaches who kind of lit a fire under him in previous conversations with, a Sean McDermott or even a general manager, Brandon Beane, talking about, what they've seen from him. I think that's going to be really fun to watch this season. If he, obviously the injury last year to his wrist hampered his season a bit. So let's see what he can really do.
Exactly. And he had 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years because he transferred from Michigan State to Florida State. He was still learning his role in the NFL, how they were going to use him. And the injury came at a terrible time. He had 2 really great games, gets hurt, and I think Brandon Beane especially mentioned this, younger players, they have to learn how to come back from something like that. And Keon Coleman, when he came back, he wasn't as effective. So he's somebody he's going to be used as a downfield threat in this offense. They want him to take advantage of those single high safety looks that they're getting because of the quarterback they have and the running game they have.
How about Tyrell Shavers? I mean, what a fun story, but more than just a fun story of an actual impact on the field, this preseason training camp, and now he earns that roster spot.
Yeah, not only did he perform well in those preseason games, you see that across the league where these guys, different players do really well against the threes, but Brandon Beane pointed out during his press conference on last Wednesday that not only did Tyrell Shavers develop confidence with Mitch Trubisky and the other quarterbacks, but Josh Allen, because throughout camp, due to injuries, Shavers was getting more opportunities with Josh and took advantage of them.
I think it's a real testament to what goes on when you are able to make take advantage, of those opportunities, like you said. And now, we get to see what he's going to do with Josh Allen on an actual game day. It's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, and he's got a different skill set. You look at Khalil Shakir, Elijah Moore, and Curtis Samuel. So much of their impact and production in the NFL has been on those routes, within 9 yards. Where Shavers, he can help you stretch the field a little bit more. And that's an area that they're trying, that's why they brought in Gabe Davis for a free agent visit a couple of weeks ago. They're trying to see what different skill sets can help them, because they know they have enough in those shorter areas. It's how can they take advantage of the looks that defenses are going to give them.
Elsewhere on the offense, what stands out to you about this group? I know we talked about continuity.
Dalton Kincaid, I think tight ends is a big one. They have depth there because Jackson Haas just completely surprised me with training camp and what he was able to show in the receiving game. So if they had an injury at tight end, I would, with all due respect to Quentin Morris, I think that Jackson Haas, not only is he a receiving threat, but what he can do as a blocker. But Kincaid, it was the consistency in camp. He looks healthy. Jay Skursky, our colleague, spoke to Dalton back in, I believe it was May or June, and he revealed that 2 knee injuries last year that he played through, which really puts into context the struggles that he had. And I know it was alarming to some fans to see that he wasn't able to build off the end of that rookie season. He is going to be very involved in this offense. He's a big part of what they want to do.
I think there's that step he's taking too, just mentally, of kind of where he's at. And, you're able to see that chemistry with Josh Allen more and more, and just the health aspect to it. I was talking to him during camp, and he was saying he feels the best he's felt in a while. And that's huge for Bills fans.
No, yeah. And then you look at the offensive line. Yes, they have 10 linemen back, but are they going to be able to stay as healthy as they were last season? Is their depth going to be tested a little bit more? If you look at it on paper, their depth, it's in a pretty good spot. They've had a couple of injuries, which is on, Tylen Grable starting the year on injury reserve. That's tough. He was getting reps at right tackle when Spencer Brown was out at the start of camp. But, Chase Lunt, their rookie 6th-round pick, looked good, really started to come on, plays different positions. Alec Anderson was getting healthy, so that's a good sign for them. It's just an area that they want to keep Deion Dawkins healthy. They want to keep Spencer Brown healthy because they are such a big part of what they do.
It's funny. I was talking to David Edwards a bit about it, and he was saying how this is the first time he can think in his career that he's returning the same 5 starters, going back to college even. But he was saying there's still kind of a mindset within the offensive line of we're starting over, even though there is that continuity. And they're kind of, let's nothing from last year counts, but also let's relearn each other to make this even more effective. They felt they kind of hit their stride late in the season last year. So how do we, start over, but also build on top of that at the same time?
Yeah, and with James Cook's contract extension, do we see him more involved in offense? Joe Brady's made it very clear he likes the way those 3 backs are used. He doesn't. Yes. He wants to split up the reps. He wants them to be used situationally, and they want to keep James Cook fresh. Thing is, though, that James Cook wants to prove to them that he can handle even more this season.
Right.
So what improvements does he show, especially in pass protection, to earn more trust and more opportunity? Defense, Katherine. It's been a topic of discussion around this team since the AFC Championship game, all the changes, the 6 draft picks they used on that side of the ball, Joey Bosa, Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi. What area, as we sit here, what area, I guess, stands out to you? What are you interested in seeing once this season starts and how it comes together? Because you could look at it from all 3 layers, whether it be defensive line, the linebackers, or that secondary.
That's a tough question because I think there's some questions all around, actually. Let's just start at the front, defensive line. I think it's also been interesting to see, and tying this all together, is how the Bills have brought back Jordan Phillips and Jordan Poyer to kind of mentor some of these guys. I think that speaks a little bit to the fact of, Brandon Beane, I asked him directly. He said they're still confident in their safeties when I asked about that group. But I think when you're bringing someone in to mentor, that's because they need some extra guidance. They need a little extra juice there. The defensive line, there's some questions there heading in. Just kind of, we know that, like you said, there's suspensions coming up with Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi. They'll miss the first 6 games. And so what are the Bills able to do during that time before they get those guys back with some, Brandon Beane said it, an influx of youth?
The defensive line in particular, it's fascinating. You have Joey Bosa coming in, and he said this is the best that he's felt in quite a while in terms of health, productivity. He feels like he's rushing as good as he's had in a while. But that group needs to learn how to rush together, those four starters, and that is a little bit more. There's more nuance involved. AJ Epinesa explained it that. He's been next to Ed Oliver for this is the 6th season. So they know each other by now. But when you bring in a new piece, whether it be somebody younger or even older, a lot of communication, a lot of video study, talking through what they do on the practice field. I think they like, based on what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have said, they like the parts that they have, but the sum has to be greater than the parts. So they have to get everybody on the same page. And at this point, they're not where they want to be, which is, pretty typical considering how many changes we've seen within that group.
Right. And it's early.
Yeah.
So I think those game reps are going to be really invaluable of just getting guys that game speed together as they're figuring out how to rush as a group. And especially with a group that rotates so much. You look at just kind of how they utilize different guys. They want people to be fresh. But that can also change kind of, whether you get in a flow or not when you're coming on and off the field.
Yeah, no, and I think that Landon Jackson, their 3rd-round pick, the edge rusher, is in a very good spot because he doesn't really have to contribute right away. That position group is a little stronger, in my opinion, even with Michael Hoyt being out for 6 games due to that suspension. But a defensive tackle, yes, Jordan Phillips is going to be on the practice squad. I'm sure he's going to be elevated at some point to contribute on game days, but they really do need TJ Sanders and Deion Walker to help. Right away, we saw TJ Sanders in camp and preseason games getting mixed in on 3rd down to provide that interior rush next to Ed Oliver, and Deion Walker showed, especially in that last preseason game, how high his ceiling can be. It's just about consistency. Those guys are going to see the field, and especially with Larry Ogunjobi down with the suspension, they're going to be tested early on. It'll be interesting to see how they respond.
Right. And such an important group, too, where, that's something when you look back the last couple of playoff runs, maybe they needed a bit more there. It's something they've tried to tend to over and over and just haven't figured it out completely yet for the playoffs yet. And I know we're about to preview week 1, but that is the ultimate goal here, is to win it all. So I think just kind of getting that group on the same page will be so critical.
Yeah, and the linebackers right now, going into the seat, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, they're healthy. And Matt Milano might have been their best player in training camp in terms of just consistent impact. And he looks like the injuries are far behind him. It's staying healthy for him. You know what he can do when he's healthy and on the field.
Talked to him for a bit, which is always, he's a quiet guy, so a little tricky. But he was saying how he feels he's in a good mindset. And I think that's so key when you look back at the injuries. He was saying just the journey of it, he's been able to kind of overcome stuff, and that this is me maybe putting a few words in his mouth, but has led him to some peace in that sense.
No, that's, And Bernard, another year as a captain, I'm sure it's going to be interesting to see. He's got to stay healthy. They've got depth, though, and I think that Shaq Thompson coming in, coming off of those injuries, I understand that. So he's got to prove it on game days. But when he's been on the field, you can see how much trust he has from this coaching staff. They've put him in on their base defense as that 3rd linebacker. He can help them stop the run. That's another guy that he's got experience. He can provide leadership. He understands the defense. He's seen a lot in the league. And it's interesting because he came into the league as a safety. And that understanding of playing in space is so important to this defense. And as long as he can stay healthy, I think that he's somebody who's definitely going to be able to help them.
He's an addition I liked a lot this year. So I am excited to see what kind of happens there. Let's jump to the secondary.
Yeah, there's a lot to go over with that.
A lot to go over. I think that's when we talked about some big questions. As we sit recording this right now, the most recent practice the Bills had, they did not have Christian Benford. They did not have Tre'Davious White. Maxwell Harrison obviously is starting the year on IR. They're banged up.
Yes, they certainly are. Benford was at least doing work off to the side in the most recent practice we saw. And he's one of the top corners in this league. He showed it last year, so as long as he's healthy, they can feel good about that. But Katherine, even if Tre'Davious White is healthy, I'm not as confident, I guess, based on what I saw in camp. He needs to be better. And, Sean McDermott said as much. There's areas that Trey White needs to improve. His role in this defense is just different from what Trey White went through last year in Baltimore and Los Angeles. So he needs to step up. I mean, their intent obviously was for Maxwell Harrison to win a job and be one of those starters. He went down with the injury. Injured reserve makes the most sense. He wasn't going to be able to help them the first couple games of the season, but Trey White needs to step up. This secondary, those corners in particular, was such a glaring weak spot in the AFC Championship game after Benford went down, and they need to be better, whether that's, getting Dorian Strong, the 6th-round pick, involved and seeing what he can do. Jamarcus Ingram taking that next step in his development. I thought Cam Lewis had a great camp when he was healthy and on the field. Just, he was mostly at nickel, safety. So, we'll see who can help them. It's just there's question marks behind Benford for sure.
There is a lot of confidence in nickel cornerback Taron Johnson. You mentioned how Cam Lewis has backed him up some. Jordan Hancock was getting mixed in a little bit there before his shoulder injury. I talked to him after the Bears game, actually, when he had that injury. He played just 2 snaps at nickel before he got hurt, and he was saying how he was so frustrated because he wanted those reps so badly. But I think, that's an area this team can be confident in Taron Johnson heading into this season for sure.
For sure, yeah. I mean, he's looked really good. He's healthy. I like Cam Lewis, Jordan Hancock. He made this team, and he absolutely deserved to. He got more reps at safety later in camp. Maybe part of that was injuries, where they see their depth there compared to nickel. But again, that's a spot where going into camp, there's a lot of questions on this defense. I'm sure Brandon Beane feels good about the depth. I'm just curious, Katherine, how much we see, are they going to play Taron Johnson a little bit less and use more of their base defense, especially with given how many explosive runs they allowed. Obviously on 3rd down, we're going to see him. It's just on those early downs to just help this run defense out and get that 3rd linebacker on the field. We saw a little bit in camp. I'm curious to see how much more we see it once the season starts.
Yeah, I got a little taste of it. And I think we'll jump ahead to the Ravens in a little bit, but that'll be an interesting matchup for that for sure. You mentioned depth at safety. Let's dive into that. It's something they've been having to navigate all over again, it feels like, where, partway through camp, Sean McDermott basically was like, well, we know Taylor Rapp is our starter, but we're still looking opposite Taylor Rapp. And Cole Bishop has kind of solidified that role at this point, I would say. But I think for McDermott to come out and say that pointed to there being some, there were questions there as Bishop navigated that. Coming back from his quad injury, missed some time and then was a little shaky in his return after, in his defense, not having much time to ramp up.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. He missed a lot of time in camp because of the quad. Those are valuable reps. You have to be able to communicate. There's so much responsibility that comes with that position.
Right.
Fans wanted them to bring somebody in from the outside, but it's very difficult to do that at this point, unless the person already has experience in the defense, like Jordan Poyer,
Yep.
what makes so much sense. It doesn't take nearly as long to onboard somebody who has as much experience as Jordan Poyer. They need to see what they have in Cole Bishop. They drafted him high. When he's been on the field and he's been able to get enough reps in practice to prepare, he's looked good. Like, you look at the preseason finale, he had some really good reps against the Buccaneers. It's just that consistency, because that's a spot in their defense. They have to be able to trust him. He has to be able to play in space. They know he can be reliable down in the box as a tackler and a run stopper. The same for Taylor Rapp, but those two guys have to be very good in pass defense as well, and they're going to be tested. A lot of teams are going to go through and look at that film from last year and see where the weak spots are, where the weak spots may still be, and they're going to see where those safeties are covering and try to see if they can take advantage of those matchups.
It is interesting. I was talking to Cole Bishop the last practice we had before this, and he was saying how he and Taylor both spent the off season, in Buffalo, just getting to work together a little more to build that chemistry. It's just unfortunate the timing of the injury. They didn't have as much, of the training camp preseason to go through that as they would have liked to have kind of see it come to fruition.
Yeah, and I understand, like, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are saying all the right things. They're expressing confidence. They want to make sure that Cole Bishop going into the season doesn't feel like somebody's breathing down his neck, or that doesn't want to feel that uncertainty. If you have a young player, especially with all the responsibility of a safety, thinking about job security and all these other factors, they're going to struggle on the field. So they're trying to instill confidence in him. And I think that's a big piece of why they're bringing in Jordan Poyer. Yes, it's competition. Jordan Poyer's not coming here to be a de facto coach. He made that very clear. He still feels like he can play, but he's also somebody that, with what he can bring from a leadership standpoint, he's going to make everybody in that room feel better about and more confident going into a game.
The Bills now finally get to start game planning, looking ahead to the Baltimore Ravens. They faced them twice last season, including in the playoffs, a very exciting game. But now both teams looking a little different. Lance, this is a big matchup for week one. Sunday Night Football. It's at home for the Bills, but just, I don't know. What do you want to dive into here?
No, it's another team that's one of the several Super Bowl contenders,
yes.
Right? And Baltimore returns a lot of players, a lot of returning starters, and they're going to be coming in with a chip on their shoulder to prove that they're better than the Bills based on what happened in the divisional round game, the Mark Andrews mishaps. And for me, Katherine, the focus will be on the Bills defense because they bent quite a bit in that game, but they didn't break because they got turnovers.
Yes.
And yes, they've been top 5 in turnovers in each of the past 5 seasons. Is that sustainable? What areas of their defense need to be better to, account for maybe a drop in that area? Whether in the one area they're focusing on in particular is third downs and getting off the field. And even the Ravens in that game were pretty effective on third down against the Bills.
Yeah, Mark Andrews has, talked to the Baltimore media over and over about how he is very anxious to kind of come back from that disastrous performance. And I think that'll be a factor in what this Bills defense is able to do, just kind of the way the Ravens are able to operate their offense. I think it's a really fascinating matchup between them and this Bills defense.
For sure. And the way that Derrick Henry, the Ravens running game, I think, especially not so much in the playoff game because they did a pretty good job bottling up Derrick Henry in that game, but earlier in the season, the success the Ravens had in the run game, I think was influential in the Bills' offseason plan to get bigger up front.
Yeah.
With Deion Walker, bringing in Landon Jackson, and just trying to fortify that defensive line because they're going to be facing some big physical football teams that kind of want to play the same way the Bills do. The Bills with their jumbo personnel, some 12 personnel. The Ravens might not be able to do as much 12 personnel in this game because Isaiah Likely is not going to be playing. They're going to have to use Charlie Kohler as their second tight end. How does that impact the game plan? Are they going to use more 3 wide receiver sets? But yeah, it's going to be, what you're going to face when you're playing the Ravens. It's going to be a lot of Lamar Jackson and it's going to be a lot of Derrick Henry.
Lamar did avoid a major injury. I think there was a moment during training camp where everyone was kind of, what is going on here? He got his foot stepped on. He is okay. He's set to play. I think that's such a fun matchup. Him and Josh Allen, obviously they're not going head to head, but I think just seeing what they're able to do. I know this is week 1, but this is a little taste of, so much of what the season's going to be like in the AFC with 2 MVP caliber players.
Yeah, no, and it's 2 teams that really spent the offseason trying to address their weaknesses. The Ravens went ahead and they tried to improve their pass rush because they couldn't get to Josh Allen in that playoff game. The Bills, like I said, the defensive line, I want to see if they're able to run the ball. James Cook, against the Ravens, didn't have as much success as some of the other opponents. Are they able to set the tone with the running game? It's going to be on Sunday Night Football. There's going to be so much attention around this game for a week 1, and with that comes hype and expectations, and there's going to be a lot of it's unfair to the players, as Sean McDermott pointed out, but there's going to be a lot of Super Bowl talk coming into a game like this in week 1, which is silly, but that's how this content machine about the NFL is driven.
I am always fascinated to see what the Ravens do with their defense. They just extended Kyle Hamilton. I think they're able to use him so creatively. But just kind of you look around the defense and they're able to have so much versatility with their different players. So I think that'll be a big matchup for the Bills offense, just kind of seeing, how guys are able to adapt to that, quick thinking, adapting. But I think that'll be a good taste early, just kind of what we're seeing out of this Bills offense and how, what Joe Brady's able to cook up. Yeah,
for sure. And the Ravens, their cornerback was a big weakness for them last year. So they brought in Jair Alexander, and Nate Wiggins is entering his second season. So, they drafted Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall, to see if he could really contribute and give them some more juice up front. Yeah, it's very obvious, everybody on offense for the Bills has talked about this throughout camp, that teams are going to be ready for them this year.
Yes.
And with the way their offense operated, with all the shifts and motions, the success, defensive coordinators, head coaches across the league have been studying the Bills to see how can we stop this? What can we take from it? How can we prepare better the next time we face them? So what did Joe Brady, Josh Allen, and everybody on that side of the ball do to counteract what they're going to be facing? Because it's going to be different looks, going to be different pressures. It's going to be pretty revealing because, these preseason games, everybody's using a vanilla playbook.
100%.
The Bills, it's all very base, it's very simple. But week one is when you finally get to see how our team's going to try to attack the Bills. And the Ravens are just a great measuring stick barometer of what the Bills are going to expect the rest of the season from defenses.
I think it is kind of nice that they knock this matchup out in week one, because then you get to learn from it. This is an opponent they're very likely to face again later in the season. So you get to see what is not working for us. What do we need to adjust? And obviously, again, they're banged up. So maybe that changes the caliber of who's on the field. But I think, if there's big picture things from a coaching standpoint, this gives them many, many weeks to work at that.
For sure. Now, as much as fans would love to see a 52-0 win over a team like the New Orleans Saints, there's so much more to be gained from facing, whether it be Baltimore, Kansas City, or a real contender early on, because, it can really give you, as a coach, as players, more information about what you're going to expect and what you need to improve on, where your weaknesses are. And from Brandon Beane's standpoint, I think that he wanted to get ahead of this by bringing in Poyer and Phillips, because in a couple weeks from now, those guys could have gotten jobs elsewhere, even though they didn't say anything. These are two available players who know your defense. Better to have some security now rather than a couple weeks from now say, we don't like where we're at here. What are we going to do?
No, definitely. I think, again, just kind of this matchup of a team, it's going to expose some weaknesses for the Bills. It may be stuff they already know, but it's going to be a little more clear after they face the Ravens.
Yeah, for sure. And again, when you're facing a mobile quarterback like Lamar and that running game, I think that's really the test. Sean McDermott at the very start of camp said, we're going to be challenged on defense with some of these suspensions.
Yes.
In particular. Michael Hoyd, I know that he kind of got overlooked in the offseason because of the suspension and Joey Bosa coming in. Hoyd was really good during camp. That's somebody I think he's going to have a big impact once he's back on the field in a situational pass rushing role. A lot of young guys. How are they going to respond? Because the double teams that they were facing against the Buccaneers, threes or twos are going to be a lot different than what you're facing with some of those massive offensive linemen the Ravens have.
We'll have so much content leading up to this game, so make sure you're reading buffalonews.com, but also subscribing wherever you get your podcasts and listening there.
Yeah, of course. You could find us. Well, we'd like you to find us on the Buffalo News digital subscription. Thank you for everybody who's been tuning in. It's been great to see the feedback, Catherine. A lot of people listening, a lot of people watching. So that's fantastic. We'll be back at it after the Ravens game. It's hard to believe, but we will be back to preview their matchup against the New York Jets on the road. She's Catherine Fitzgerald. I'm Lance Lysowski. See you guys soon.
Treat your team to the most flavorful pizza on game day at Picasso's Pizza. 4 great Western New York locations: Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Picasso's. We are Buffalo's Pizza since 1980. Order online today at picassospizza.net.